We are talking technology. Matthew Dickerson is with me. Happy New Year, Matthew.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Same to you. And I'm pretty certain that this year is going to be a little bit different to what we saw last year.
Yes, well, we're going to talk about that today, what we can expect this year in technology transforming our lives. And firstly, virtual reality and augmented reality will continue to progress rapidly.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Chris. I think both of those will continue to progress. Many people confuse those two and think they're the same thing, but there's a crucial difference between virtual reality, or VR as many people call it, and augmented reality, or AR. One of the things there is that basically with virtual reality, what you're trying to do is take yourself from where you are and transport yourself to somewhere completely different. We saw a lot of that happening through the pandemic in 2020 with people taking virtual holidays, for example. They couldn't get on a plane, they couldn't go and visit people, but they'd go into a VR headset and they'd be surrounded by this sound and vision that was some other place. So that was the whole idea of virtual reality, go to another world altogether. But augmented reality, I think we're going to see a lot more with augmented reality this year. And what augmented reality, or AR, does is takes your current surroundings and incorporates some sort of other world in your current surroundings. So, for example, you might go into your lounge room and you think, Joe, I'd love to see a new lounge chair there. You go online to some organisations that might offer this service where you can see lounge chairs, different lounge chairs in your lounge room, and actually have the camera pointing at your lounge room, but superimpose a lounge chair in that lounge room over the top. So you get this mixture of a virtual world with the real world that you're working in. So I think that sort of thing we're going to see happen a lot more as cameras get better and as computing power gets better. Then I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Imagine the augmented reality of trying on a pair of clothes without actually going into a store, for example. So I can see a whole range of things happening with both VR and AR over the next year.
You'd have to keep the clothes on. You never know who's watching.
That's right.
Matthew, educators found 2020 an incredible challenge, but what can they do in 2021?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually, Chris. I'm not sure the exact answer of this. I do know that it's going to have to get better. There'll still be remote education for the foreseeable future. We'll still see people either at university or at schools being educated in some way remotely. And all these skills that educationalists have built up over the years in being able to look at people, look at a group of students, for example, in a classroom or in a university lecture theatre, and work out whether what they're saying is relevant and whether they're connecting with those people, all those skills are suddenly lost in this world when they've had to do it basically to a camera. And I think that's something that we'll see get a lot better. We already talked about it through the year, some ways for those educationalists to actually sense virtually what's happening with all those people looking at their cameras, whether they're paying attention, whether their eyes are focused on the content that's being presented. So I think we're going to see that get a lot better. And I think that whole remote education piece, which is difficult and challenging, technology will be thrown at that in large chunks, and I think we'll see some real progress there. Again, probably involving some of that AR and VR that we talked about in that first session.
Yeah, and working from home has really been almost the norm last year due to COVID, but we want it to be by choice, not because of a lockdown.
Yeah, we do. Absolutely, we do. And I've been talking about it for years, Chris. I've always said that work should be something that you do, not a place that you go to. And you often heard companies talk about their working from home policy, but really it didn't apply to most people, or you had to jump through so many hoops to do it. And so it didn't really happen, even though lots of companies would say that we allow our staff to do it or we're going to let our staff do it. And then suddenly COVID-19 came along and people had to be working from home. So very quickly, people realised that they could work from home, they could be more productive, and all that spare time they had because they weren't commuting. And I'm talking about people in the big city, obviously, where we are, Chris, we don't have to worry too much about a long commute time. But in the big city, I mean, many people travel for an hour to get to work each way. That's 2 hours sitting in a car. Sure, you can listen to a few podcasts, listen to the radio, but it's not really productive time. So I think the whole piece around working from home, once it gets to the point where people can go back to the workplace, That'll be the real test. And if these organisations have learned anything during this process, it is that people can be productive and work from home. They can probably be happier. And you'll get to the point where people will start to choose their workplace as to the places that will allow them to work from home, because that will be a big part of the decision. How much do you get paid? What are your holidays like? What's the future direction of the company like? And can I work from home? I mean, these will be big parts of the decision. But again, we've got to get that technology better. The NBN almost coped with what we had to do working from home, but it was probably found wanting in a few areas. 4G was a bit tough, especially in some areas where people were remote in regional areas. So the internet connectivity and the tools that we have access to will need to get a bit better, but I think that will improve, and hopefully we'll see more people working from home with a much better work environment.
And Matthew, 5G will march forward in 21 and be the norm by the end of the year.
Yeah, look, there's still a bit of talk around all the conspiracy theories. I mean, you hear about everything. It's caused COVID-19, apparently. It causes cancer. I haven't heard one person talking about Steve Smith had a 5G phone. That's why he didn't score any runs in the first 2 tests. So you never know what people are blaming 5G for. But once Apple came out with some 5G handsets, which they did at the end of last year, already we saw other manufacturers such as Samsung, Huawei already had 5G handsets. It's getting to the point now, by the end of this year, you'll have a lot more handsets on the market, obviously a lot more locations with 5G, and you'll see some of those different examples or advantages of 5G. There's still a bit of controversy with 5G. Still a few people are worried about some areas, and one that's actually a valid one is the aviation industry in America has brought this up, where one of the spectrums that's been auctioned off in America is a 3.7 to 3.9 gigahertz spectrum. And that's fairly close. It's 4.2 to 4.4, the spectrum that's used for radar altimeters. And they're basically a bit worried about maybe getting a bit of interference and affecting the ability for a plane to actually see what's happening out there in terms of the radar. So that might be something that comes up during the year, but I think these problems will be solved and we'll see 5G as a much larger piece of our equation.
And the future of the electric car starts this year.
Yeah, there's a bit of research out from one particular organisation that says that we've been mucking around with electric cars now for the last 10 years and they've been slowly gathering momentum. But basically, ABI research says this is now when EVs really start. When you get past that early adopter, when you get past the people who are really trying to do something for the environment and get it into the mainstream, that's when things really start to happen. And we know of Tesla, they almost hit, they're a few hundred cars short of their $500,000 car target this year. So when you see some of those things starting to pick up and gather momentum and it gets in the mainstream, that's when things will change. But ABI Research believes that by the end of this decade, 25% of all new car sales across the entire world will be EVs. And that's a fairly dramatic change. For example, in Australia at the moment, 0.6% of all new car sales are EVs. So long way to go there, but that's what ABI Research believe is that EVs will start to take up from this year.
Very fascinating seeing where technology is headed this year. Thank you for joining us this morning, Matthew. Of course, we can see you on YouTube. Just search Matthew Dickerson Technology. Should do the trick, do you think?
Absolutely right.
All right, mate. You have a great week, and we will talk again at the same time next week. Thanks, Matthew.
Sounds great. Thanks, Chris.